World War II had been ongoing for more than half a decade by now, casualties climbing by the day. The Allies needed a way to force the remaining power of the Axis to surrender. However, there was no clear path. Treaties and unconditional surrender were proposed, however this proved to be futile. Despite Germany's surrender in May 1945, Japan still refused. The Allies had seemingly ran out of options, and a continuation of the war seemed imminent. At the same time, Japan was planning an all-out suicidal defense called Operation Kitsuga. The Allies now had no choice but to rely on their last resort, the atomic bomb.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
By 1945, Japan was preparing for a final homeland defense strategy known as Operation Kitsuga. This plan was built on the idea of making any invasion as costly as possible for the United States. Japan mobilized military forces, civilian militias, and resources for what they believed would be a decisive final battle on their home islands. Japan's leadership was divided. Some Japanese military leaders believed that even if some defeat was inevitable, inflicting heavy casualties might force better surrender terms. Others were open to negotiating peace through intermediaries. While the war intensified in the Pacific, another effort was unfolding far from the battlefield in complete secrecy across the United States, the Manhattan Project. Its purpose was not simply scientific discovery, but urgency driven by the fear and competition. Allied leaders were aware that Nazi Germany had strong scientific institutions and had made early progress in nuclear physics. Even though Germany never came close to completing an atomic bomb, the possibility that it might succeed first created a powerful sense of pressure. At the same time, Japan's continued resistance in the Pacific meant the war was far from over, and leaders began to consider whether a breakthrough weapon could bring a faster end to the conflict. The United States responded by launching one of the greatest and most secretive scientific and industrial efforts in human history. The Manhattan Project was not confined to a single laboratory. It was a nationwide operation involving multiple sites spread across remote and highly controlled locations. Entire communities were constructed in secrecy, including Los Alamos in New Mexico, Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and Hanford in Washington State. These places were chosen specifically for their isolation, security, and access to the massive energy resources needed for nuclear research. There are tens of thousands of people working on the project, including physics, chemists, engineers, technicians, and military personnel. Many of them did not even know the full purpose of what they were building. Information was highly classified, and the project was divided into sections so that no single group understood the entire design. The center of the scientific project was J. Robert Oppenheimer, a theoretical physicist who became the scientific director of the program at Los Alamos. Oppenheimer was responsible for coordinating some of the most complex scientific work ever attempted, bringing together theory and practical engineering to turn abstract physics into a functioning weapon. After 3 years of development, the atomic bomb was finally tested on July 16, 1945. The first atomic bomb was tested in the New Mexico desert in an event known as the Trinity Test. The explosion confirmed that nuclear fission could release energy on an unimaginable scale. For Oppenheimer and the scientists involved, this moment was not one of the celebration, but of realization and emotional weight. Years of theoretical physics and engineering had become a physical reality in front of them. Oppenheimer later recalled a line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am death, the destroyer of worlds." After the successful Trinity test on July 16, 1945, the focus of the Manhattan Project shifted from development to immediate military use. The test confirmed that an atomic explosion was possible, and it marked the point where the weapon moved from experimental science into real-world application. In the weeks that followed, U.S. military and government leaders made the decision to use the bomb against Japan. The goal was to bring a rapid end to World War II in the Pacific, avoiding a prolonged invasion that was expected to cause extremely high casualties on both sides. Scientists who had worked on the project were informed that the weapon would soon be used in combat, although many were not directly involved in the military decision-making process. At the same time, bomb designs were finalized and prepared for deployment. One uranium-based bomb and one plutonium-based bomb were ready for use. The target selection began shortly after the successful Trinity test, as military planners worked to decide where the atomic bomb would have the most strategic and measurable effect. The goal was not only military impact, but also scientific observation. Leaders wanted a target where the destruction could be clearly studied, rather than a city already heavily damaged by earlier firebombing campaigns. As a result, officials looked for cities that were still relatively intact, with important military or industrial value, and with enough population density to demonstrate the full scale of the weapon's power. Several cities were considered and removed from the list for different reasons, including weather conditions, prisoner of war concerns, or prior damage from conventional bombing raids. Among the main targets were Hiroshima, Kokura, and Nagasaki. Hiroshima was chosen first because of its important military command center and transport hub that had remained relatively intact, making it ideal for demonstrating the full power of the atomic bomb. For the second mission, attention shifted to Kokura as the primary target for the bomb known as Fat Man. Kokura was selected because it contained military installations and industrial facilities, making it strategically significant, and Nagasaki was assigned as a backup target in case Kokura could not be struck. On August 9, 1945, however, conditions over Kokura were unexpectedly poor. Thick clouds and smoke, partly from earlier conventional bombing in nearby areas, made it difficult for the crew to visually identify the aiming point. Since the mission required direct visual confirmation before releasing the bomb, multiple passes were made over the city, but visibility did not improve. As fuel became limited and anti-aircraft activity increased pressure on the aircraft, the mission was redirected to the secondary target, Nagasaki. Although Nagasaki was also partially covered by clouds, a brief opening allowed the bomb to be dropped. In the end, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the two cities that experienced atomic bombing, while Kokura, originally selected for destruction, was spared due to weather conditions on the day of the mission. After the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945, the immediate aftermath was unlike anything seen in modern warfare. In both cities, the explosions caused immediate and overwhelming destruction. Entire urban areas were devastated within moments, with buildings reduced to ruins and thousands of lives lost instantly. In the aftermath, surviving infrastructure struggled to function, and essential systems such as hospitals, transportation, and communication were severely disrupted. In the days and weeks that followed, the full effects of radiation exposure became increasingly apparent. Survivors experienced serious health complications, and recovery efforts were challenged by the resources and widespread damage. The consequences extended far beyond the initial impact, affecting public health and rebuilding efforts for years to come. Following these events and the broader pressures of the war in the Pacific, including years of escalating conflict, widespread destruction across multiple fronts, the sustained bombing campaign over Japanese cities, and the entry of the Soviet Union into war against Japan, Japan ultimately announced its surrender on August 15, 1945. This decision brought an end to World War II after 6 years of global conflict that involved nations across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific, reshaping borders, governments, and international power on an unprecedented scale, and marking the beginning of a new post-war world order defined by reconstruction and shifting global alliances.